We have this, American lifestyle and culture that is in no way health promoting at all. And it's very all or nothing. It's very much like this diet or macro or count every calorie or just very sciency approach that I think really takes, like, we are human beings. We're not like little science projects, right?
You ever have one of those days where you're crushing it at work, but your body's just not getting the memo? Or maybe you've scoured every diet hack online only to end up cranky and back at square one? We've all been there, but today we're shaking things up with someone who's rewriting the weight loss playbook. Meet Dr. Meghan Garcia Webb, a triple board certified physician. She's the expert people turn to when they're fed up with endless weight loss ups and downs, combining advanced GLP-1 medications with practical life coaching for results that stick. Think of Dr. Meghan as the guide who's got the science and the strategy to make health feel doable. On this episode, we're diving into the truths no one's talking about, why the scale's not the whole story, how your mind's pulling the strings, and the quiet wins that hit deeper than any number. It's not about magic pills or guilt trips. It's about unlocking what actually works. If you're ready to sidestep the same old traps and get some game-changing insights, this one's for you. Let's jump in. Good afternoon, Dr. Meghan. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, I always start at the beginning. When did you first realize, all right, hang on, this isn't just about willpower moment in medicine?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I graduated from residency and I started my first job, I'm so excited to be in primary care and I'm like changing lives and, keeping people healthy. And I realized that I was just having the same conversations with people over and over and over, especially about weight, and I would because I'm just passionate about it anyway. I think when you treat weight, it's such an efficient way to help people be healthy. So I'm just throwing everything I got at people. And then they come back in 6 months and they're like, well, it didn't really work, but maybe I'll try something else. And nothing was kind of sticking. And I was like, it's not an information problem, clearly. Like, I'm giving you books, I'm giving you videos, I'm giving you everything, but there's something missing.
That's sort of like, I think a lot of people, when they say weight, they just don't know. You go to the doctor sometimes and they're like, well, stress less. And it's like, well, okay, what does that mean? Or, just eat some vegetables. Okay, what kind? You don't really get the whole in-depth of what you should be doing. From the days that you started, right, to teachings now we see about obesity, how's that changed, whether, explicitly or implicitly in your practice and what you see throughout the medical field and with your colleagues? How do you think the teachings about obesity have changed since the days that you got started?
At least in the medical world, I think we're much more apt to see it, number one, as a chronic disease. And then number two is as multifactorial. I think there are so many different ways that people get to having a higher BMI than they necessarily want or feel like is healthy for them. And so I think that, it's not just what people have been eating, but it's the medications that they're on, how they grew up, their genetics, other medical issues that can be interfering. And so I think we really appreciate more now the diversity of reasons that can get people into this place where they're not really happy with their health. And I also think that we're much more cognizant of the many different ways that it can affect people's health, from obviously heart disease and stroke, but also so many different types of cancers. The risk is increased when you have obesity, and just how widely it affects everybody's health in so many dimensions.
Well, you mentioned genetics. What is your take on that? Do you feel like, in terms of weight gain and potential for obesity, diabetes, what do you think the correlation with genetics is? Do you think it plays as much of a factor as we were told in the past, or maybe not as much as we thought, and it's more adapting maybe the lifestyles that you were raised with and your parents and maybe your grandparents had adopted?
Yeah, I think we have a much better understanding of very specific genetic causes of obesity. And so, whereas, we might have attributed, and of course, how you grew up and the people you're around, that also shapes your eating patterns, how much you exercise. It is such an important part. But especially for people who have really, really high BMIs, now we're aware of, certain genetic causes and predispositions that can really create this very unhealthy medical picture for people. And I think whereas before we just didn't know, we just didn't have the research.
Yeah, I think society maybe clings a little bit to this like just eat less, move more
Yeah.
mindset. If you agree, why do you think that is sort of the case?
I just want to preface by saying the genetic causes are still incredibly rare. So it's usually not, the top, the top reason, but they do exist. And I think it's good that we're more aware of them now. But I think eat less, exercise more. It just sounds like an easy solution for people. And it's partly true. I think if people eat less and exercise more, you're going to feel better, right? But I think the whole like eat less is so not helpful as a tip. It's like eat less what? Like what are you
Exactly.
talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. What am I
And
eating less of?
right. And I also think that really doesn't take into account like this kind of diet culture that we have in America, where, I think we have gotten into a lot of trouble by telling people they have to be very restrictive when we don't really give them guidelines in terms of, okay, cut out, make your portions smaller, but like you need more people need more structure, they need more guidance. And I think it can be very overwhelming for people. So eat less, exercise more is, of course, that's going to be good for anybody, but, and I think it's just easy to say. And I think a lot of times the people who say that, from my experience, they haven't spent a lot of time with patients who have obesity or have issues with their weight and really talk to them, because there's so many reasons why people are in that situation.
Right. Exactly. And I think just having the conversation is why not, right?
Right.
For you though, specifically, was it maybe like a turning point or maybe a patient interaction early on that made you rethink sort of this like standard approach that you were taking in your field?
Yeah, I had a patient, she's still my patient, but we were talking about her weight and the issues that she was having. And it really just had so much more to do with her relationship with her family growing up and her relationship with she had people in her family that had pretty severe chronic medical issues. And it just, she had this idea that if she was somehow taking care of herself, that it was this type of, betrayal, like that she was somehow sharing in the suffering, and that was helpful. So that was kind of a mental block. And it really just came about because we were having a longer conversation than you normally would with somebody. And so I realized, there's so much of that that's out there that contributes to why people have weight issues, and some people, they've been told by family members when they were kids to, lose weight or eat this way. And then, they overeat as a sort of to protect their autonomy in some way. So I think there's so many very deep personal reasons behind why people might have a really conflicted relationship with food. And so that was a really good early lesson for me.
So it's sort of the mental side to things that we think it's just, okay, you're eating, slow down, slow down. But why are we eating this way, or why are we making these choices? And it sounds like this patient specifically may have felt like she was the caretaker, or I need to just be that role. I can't take care of me. I need to take care of others, kind of thing. I don't know if that's fair to say. But again, the whole mental aspect of things that we don't really
Right.
go into as much.
Yes, exactly. Right. It was a betrayal of her family members if she was the healthy one.
Right. Don't
So
you have to look like we do.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You're one of us or you're not. Okay, so the traditional like weight loss model, like we said, eat less, whatever it might be, these sort of traditional narratives we've been told over the years. What do you think's been missing from that model? Sort of like the food pyramid, right? We're saying, oh,
Mm.
years ago we should be flipping it upside down. What would that be for you if you had to say what we could or what we should have changed about this traditional model?
My gosh. Well, I have so many ideas about this, but we don't have hours. So I think one thing is that I just want people to be aware that there is not a supportive system around them to help them make these changes. So it's hard enough to make change on your own, right? There's always some natural resistance when we're trying to evolve and grow and improve. That's just what happens naturally. And then we have this, American lifestyle and culture that is in no way health promoting at all. And it's very all or nothing. It's very much like this diet or macro or count every calorie or just very sciency approach that I think really takes, like, we are human beings. We're not like little science projects, right? And then there's this other side of like consumerism, value for money, like convenience, and really catering to people who are trying to be productive and, maybe in survival mode because they're working and they have kids. And so I think I always like to tell people that, I feel like our culture really forces people to be so countercultural if they want to be healthy, because everybody's kind of reinventing the wheel on their own if they want to be healthy. Because if you just don't pay attention to things, you probably will end up overweight or obese. So that's one of the big things I like to tell people. It's not just a personal problem.
Yeah, and everyone's different, right? Like this might work for you. You might have a food sensitivity to that. Like there's so many
Right.
different factors that go into things that you can't really just pinpoint a one size fits all approach to everyone.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, okay, so talk about how you treat patients today. What makes like the weight medicine MD approach different from these traditional weight loss clinics that we've all seen online?
Yeah. Well, I'm a bit of a minimalist, and I think that we've really overcomplicated how we treat weight. And I think one of the things I love so I do medicine and life coaching together because I feel like that's such a good blend. You're really addressing the mindset in addition to all the medical issues that are going on. And I think sometimes the traditional models tend to spoon feed people, like you need a nutritionist and you need this other person, you need like this team of like 10 people. And I just haven't found that to be the case. I'm like, I think we just need you. We need to figure out like what the roadblocks are for you, and then you can teach yourself. And you don't need 10 people like holding you accountable. Like you can hold yourself accountable. And I think to me, I think that's a much more win-win approach because I really teach my patients I want them to be fully responsible for their results. I don't want them to be depending on 5 clinicians to be doing these things for them. I want them to own the results because that's the only way, I'm not going to be there with them every day. And these other clinicians aren't either. And what we know from research in terms of, eating patterns and what helps is that really the sole factor in people being successful is just finding something they can be consistent with. And I think you really have to, and that's very individualized for people.
I love that approach too, of putting the onus on yourself because again, you know your body, you know your cravings, you know your inner thoughts. Everything is with you. And like you said, this team of RDs, like whatever it might be,
Right.
they can't be with you and handhold you all day. So it's more of a tough love approach in a way to some people might think, but it's again teaching you how to be intuitive, I think, about choices you make.
Yes, exactly.
And you don't see a lot of people like that are doctors that also are into literally life coaching. It's I like the aspect of it because a lot of people go to the doctor and they think, okay, I have 3 minutes with this person, maybe 5, I don't know, and you're kind of like rush through and like blah 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 blah. But to be able to take it from someone who understands it from the top down, like yourself, I think is a very valuable, aspect of your business to have for people. Is it something where you meet people in person, telehealth? Like, how does that work in your business?
Yeah, so for my practice, it's mostly telehealth, but we do in-person meetings. Sometimes it really depends on the person. I have some patients who really like to do a face-to-face visit every once in a while. And then, I will offer like, I'll come look at your fridge if you want.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
come
cool.
look at your home gym if you want. Like we can do that for a session. So, and some people are like, please do not look at my fridge or my gym. And so we just do everything telehealth. But I think that's one of the nice things that we've realized since the pandemic is there is so much that you really can do, and especially for weight and for coaching, the follow up is so close, at least for how I practice, because I really want to catch people, really want to talk about these times when things have not gone right for them, like that time where they like, ended up eating a whole bag of chips, right? And it's like, well, let's talk about how that happened, and not in a judgmental way, but this is a very curious approach to there's something that happened here that got you to where you didn't want to be. So let's backtrack and see what happened. That does require closer follow up. I don't want people to be taking half a day off of work every week. It's not very sustainable for people. And I really want people to be able to be consistent. So,
It's way more efficient too. It's
yeah.
like people might be
Oh, so
commuting
much.
and da 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 and waiting in your office and
Right.
right. It's like, hey, here's our appointment. You're on. I'm on.
Right.
Much more efficient.
Much more efficient. Absolutely. Yeah. Patients love it.
Obviously, by now, anyone listening has seen the GLP ones. The probably everyone goes to Ozempic or Wegovy or one of those brands that they see the jingles on commercials. I wanted to ask you because I think there's a lot of, I mean, buzz obviously because it's constantly in your television, and I think confusion. People don't know, like, are these good or are they bad? We hear like they might give them to children. Is that good? When a patient comes to you and then they say, "Oh, I saw this commercial. This looks like it's good." Of course, there's 700 side effects, like everything, but
Right. Right.
whatever, right? They look happy and they're dancing on the commercial. Why not give it a shot? How do you decide if these medications are right for them? Do you evaluate them one on one, or what's your stance on that? Is it case by case?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I have some people, and sometimes it's very obvious. Like I definitely, at least a couple times a week, I have patients who come in and they're like, these are the things that I'm doing. This is the way I eat. This is the way I exercise. I've been doing this and nothing's moving. And usually that's a case of, medication induced weight gain. There are quite a lot of medications that can really, not that people can't lose weight on them, but they can make it more difficult. And people just feel like, I'm just not having the response that I and would be expecting. And so for people like that, I'll start medication sooner than I might for somebody else who hasn't tried anything yet, hasn't even thought about changing their diet, or hasn't even tried to exercise yet. So it is very individual. I think the biggest question I get is, well, can I just go on this for a couple months and then go off? Which is not a great idea and not really how they work. But that's the big question that everybody asks me.
Yeah, I think it's because it's on everyone's mind. You're seeing it, and it's almost like a division where people are, oh, I hate it, and people are like, oh, I look amazing as a result of taking it. So
Right.
it's very hard to push someone away from something where they have a friend that's got the results and they're struggling, which kind of leads me to my next question, right? So someone who might come to you and they say, I've been failed by everything out there. I've tried this, I've tried that program, I've gone to a trainer, I've gone to like you said, the
Mhm.
nutritionist, the dietitian. How do you sort of begin personalizing care for someone who just is so defeated by the quote unquote system?
Yeah, I think, one thing that I hear all the time is I've tried everything and nothing works. And that's always like a little red flag in my brain and we all do this, right? But we have a natural tendency to overgeneralize. And so if someone comes to me, immediately the first thing I'll do is just get really granular of like, okay, what have we tried? What haven't we tried? What was that? Like, let's get the data, right? Because sometimes people are like, well, I tried Weight Watchers once, and it's like, okay, well, that's versus like somebody who is consistently exercising and is eating exactly how they want to eat, and they're not really seeing any progress. So that's usually where I will start with people. I do find that, it also depends on how sick someone is or how close they are to getting sick. So if I have somebody and they're 59, they have a lot, they're on a statin or on a cholesterol medication, they're on a lot of things, but nothing's, no terrible medical events have happened yet. They've tried and they haven't been able to fully make these lifestyle changes. For a lot of these people, or they have pre-diabetes or things like that, I will start something sooner because I do feel like, especially for people who've tried and they just have kind of lost hope, that comes up a lot for people. They just feel really defeated. So if I have somebody who feels really defeated, they haven't been able to do anything, they just don't want to try again, and we have these very real medical issues looming in the very near future, those are people that I will usually start on medication sooner because it's really the goal is to prevent these things from happening downstream.
Yeah, it's like you see the ticking time bomb, like,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Counting
Right.
down and counting down, right? Do you ever talk about the quality of sleep with people? Is that a factor in your practice, or is that something where, like, if someone comes to you and they're like, oh, I'm sleeping 5 hours a night, is it like, okay, we need to get you at least 7 kind of thing? Or is it more about lifestyle choices in terms of what they eat?
That is such a good question. I think that, well, a lot of people, eat late at night, or they just don't know why they can't sleep well. And there are some, very big culprits like alcohol, eating late at night. Some people, they just feel like they have kind of a busy life and they just stay up late because it's the only time that they have for themselves. So I do try to get people to get, at least 7 hours of sleep, but it also, a lot of times when people come to me, especially for, if they have a higher BMI than we feel like is healthy, a lot of times I'm checking them for sleep apnea too, because that is such a big issue and really improves so significantly when they lose weight.
Yeah, it's true. It's just weird how you see so many things that we thought were separate are more interconnected, I think, than we may have realized. Do you think that there's but what people might tend to get wrong out there, just in terms of weight loss in general? It could be doctors, it could be patients, the media. Do you think we're being sort of spoon fed just wrong information and it's more simple than we thought?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. Yes, I think we totally overcomplicate everything because I like to just zoom out and look like, what is everybody doing in the rest of the world, right? I don't think they're like counting their macros in Japan and counting every calorie and getting, having all these like powders and shakes and like lab created foods. And of course, there's always like a time and a place for those, but they're not living on those, right? And so I think, we kind of, it's so easy to just do, and we kind of miss the forest for the trees of like, we're clearly not doing something right because we're the ones with the problem, right? Other people in other areas, other countries really don't have the problems that we have. And they don't seem, it's not like they're doing more than us. Like they're doing a lot less. And I think we definitely overcomplicate things for sure.
Obviously, we can go down the rabbit hole of like, okay, what are we spraying on our food? And they're right. But
Right.
for
Yeah.
taking from a top level down, the same, they're commuting to work, they have kids, they're taking care of elderly, whatever their life throws at you, they're doing the same thing in these places. It's just for us, it's just, again, the wrong messaging. And I think you're treating obesity as a chronic medical condition. So like, from like looking down at that, like what shifts when you do that, whether it's talking to a patient, do they understand it? Does it seem a lot more real to them at that point than, oh, you're just overweight? And it's like, no, this is a chronic condition you have. This is diabetes. This could be many different things that it could lead to. This is much more serious than you're thinking.
Yes, so I think that is a key point to get across to people, especially people on the medications, that, this is not like we're treating pneumonia and you take a medication and then you're done. This is something that needs to be managed lifelong. And even if you lose the weight, everything you're doing, you still need to continue to do. It's not like it's a one and done type of thing. So, and I think we also are, hopefully are moving away from this like placing all this blame on the patient and moving more towards, well, this is actually a pretty complicated problem. And there are, personal factors that make it difficult for this person to lose weight. There are cultural factors. There are, issues in their family, their environment, so many different reasons. So I think we have a better appreciation of that as well.
Yeah, and as you touched on the mental side earlier, what are like some of the changes you see in your patients? Not obviously not just physically, and that's I'm sure the primary goal for most patients, but like the emotional side. Like what are you kind of seeing from these people? Again, going back to your life coaching.
Yeah. So I think the big transformation that I see for people, aside from, numbers on a scale, is that people just feel in control. They feel at peace. I think people come to me and they're very frantic and they're like, I don't know what's going on. I have to fix this. They're very kind of overwhelmed and they want to do something, but they're not sure what. And maybe they've tried a lot of things and there's just a lot of overwhelm is probably the best word. And then I think that's what's so rewarding for me is I can feel like I can see that they know like they're in the driver's seat. They can make these changes. They are in control of what happens. They're in control of their food choices. And it's not like I'm not teaching them to white knuckle their way through the day or, get rid of all the bad foods, right? Like I'm not telling them to like lock their cabinets. I feel like my goal for everybody is that they could be around all their favorite foods and just eat what they want, stop when they're full. It's not stressful. How you ate when you were a kid. That's my goal.
Yeah, well, that's probably a comforting for a lot of people to kind of go back to that time. A lot of people don't put themselves in the mindset of what it was like when I was a kid because everything was different. So
Right.
when you put them back there, I would imagine it could be a comforting thing for most people to kind
Yeah.
of go back to that time when things were just not stressful.
Yeah. Or they go back to trusting themselves,
Yeah.
trusting their body, listening to their body, not getting confused by all the different health information out there, but working more off of their internal compass and their internal cues, I think is very comforting and peaceful for people and also gives them a sense of real accomplishment and autonomy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, instead of the team, it's you. It's all back on
Right.
you and you
Right.
learning how to be, thinking for yourself and making the choices that are best for your body.
Absolutely.
So, like, okay, so say if you had to take a magic wand and redesign the healthcare system to better serve these patients or just, general obesity, what would be the first thing you would change?
Gosh, that's such a great question. I mean, nobody eats fruits and vegetables. Like, even if people think they're eating fruits and vegetables, they're not eating enough. And I always like to, so I would probably make it a lot more accessible for everybody because, and of course, there are these so many places in the United States that are food deserts, right? And
Yes.
so that's another issue that people like maybe they want to eat healthy, they just literally have no access to it. So I always like to think of especially coming from this diet culture that's so restrictive. I always like to think of what can we have more of, what can we lean into and have in abundance. I think that's a nice place for people to be or think about. And so I would probably start there. Like I always tell people, try to get 5 servings of fruits or vegetables a day, and if you do that, there's just less room for other stuff.
Are you more a fan of certain? Because some people say, "Oh, nightshades," or this one has this and that one has that, or is it just a baseline of put this in versus the bag of potato chips kind of thing? Like, let's just start there, and we'll work out maybe like, hey, you have a sensitivity to whatever, but we'll figure that out later. But in the beginning, like, just always in your mind, go to the fruits and vegetables when
Right.
for those servings a day.
Exactly. Like learn to love them, have them in addition to whatever you're already eating, right? And then, of course, if people find like, well, I really don't like cantaloupe or whatever, you can always tweak it. But I think having that sort of mindset of, just it's like my favorite book is Michael Pollan's, food rules book. It's like eat plants. So that's what I would probably I would make that required reading for everybody as well.
That is a good book. No, I agree with you there. Yeah, fiber, like just making sure you're getting this stuff into your body every day.
Absolutely.
As we're kind of seeing things shift in the country, and like you said, many countries are already way ahead of us in their daily practice of just living life and eating well. What gives you hope that we're moving sort of past the whole, all right, let's just eat no fruits and vegetables and just grab whatever's in the bag and go and donuts and what gives you hope we're kind of moving past that as a society here in America?
I mean, I think it is hopeful. Like these devices, I'm not somebody who likes to track every tiny little thing.
Oh, okay.
But I think the fact that, but a lot of people do. And I think the fact that it's like so common now to talk about getting your steps in, or I want to, get my 10K, steps or walking. Like I think there is an upside to all that of this kind of integrating small bits of exercise into every day, the walking pads, the trying to not be sedentary. I think those are all recognizing some really key issues and that you can address them without a big life overhaul.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it also becomes a stressor for some people because then they're like, oh, I need to hit 10,000 steps. I'm at this. And it's like, well, I read that that's like a marketing campaign from Japan in the 60s about 10, like to sell pedometers. It's really, you just need about 7,000. But like you said, it's just like the movement, just get up and move like the NEAT method or whatever you want to call it. Just kind of like move your body and just don't sit at a desk, stand and walk to get fresh air, or sunshine, like things that you can kind of little free tweaks you can put out there in your day and see the reward come tenfold just from things that you thought, I'm in this room with no light and artificial light and no window, no interaction. And what do? You just, okay, the bag of chips is there. So it's much easier
Right.
to sort of stay in that system and that whole mentality, I think. But hopefully people are moving past it. For you, someone who again gets a lot of people who said maybe they've tried everything and of course you were right to point out let's break down exactly what you tried, but for someone who's listening and they feel like they're in that spot of look, I've tried everything, I'm still struggling, like what would be your first piece of advice to them?
I always like to separate the actions from the scale. So I would tell somebody, figure out what ideally you want to be doing, you know? Maybe you've decided you want to go to the gym 3 days a week, Figure those things out and be consistent with them. And you're going to feel better regardless. Like there's 100% chance if you do the things that you have thought are going to work for you. If you do your plan, you will feel better. Now, for some people, they'll do that and the scale will change drastically. And for some people, they'll do exactly what they wanted to do and the scale might not move as much. And for me, that always tells me, how much other things are going on. So, does somebody have a medical condition that's contributing or are they on medications? But I think you can always control your actions. And I think that's a very empowering thing for people. And then, kind of where your weight ends up, we don't know, but you're going to feel better anyway.
Right. I'm sensing like the general theme is like accountability. A lot of this for people, right?
Yeah.
Or if you agree, for people to just take it on to themselves to be empowered with the information that you're providing them, but to be empowered themselves to live that lifestyle. Like you said, it's not just a quick antibiotic. It's going to be a
Right.
lifelong commitment, and you can still have foods you like you mentioned, but just kind of, take that accountability onto yourself.
Yes, and I think there's always this, low-hanging fruit of the supplement or this quick, thing that you can try. But I think the real magic pill is consistency and just doing these small things, but really knowing that you just have to do it for years. But you can also start feeling better right away. So I think sometimes people get a little overwhelmed when they think about, oh, I gotta change everything. But if you go to the gym, you're gonna feel great. Maybe you didn't want to go there. Maybe it was kind of a hard to get yourself there, but afterwards you're immediately gonna feel better.
Yeah, no, that's a good point because, like you mentioned, you're not a fan of the the tech or maybe something telling you to do this and do that and track this and write this down. I see people wearing the CGMs everywhere I go, trying to get a level of their, blood sugar. Do you like any of that tech? Do you think that any of that's kind of beneficial, or do you think it creates like another stressor in their lives?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it really depends on the person. And I think it is about knowing yourself, because I do have some patients and they love to track everything. And so for them, it's very easy to do. It's just kind of how they're wired. And then I have other patients who would really go more by like a feeling or kind of more of intuition. And then it would create more stress. But I certainly do every once in a while. I will say to somebody, hey, why don't you try a CGM for a week or two? I don't really have them do it any longer than that. But especially if, someone probably has more sugar in their diet than they know about, or they're just not realizing like, hey, the pink drink from Starbucks like has a lot of
Not
sugar
that
in it, or
great.
right, right. So I think it can be very eye-opening for people, but I can't really see myself ever telling somebody like, wear this forever. But for the right person, it can be, the data can be very telling.
Yeah, what if it's like a age thing? Maybe some of the younger kids are like, oh, strap anything on. They're
Yes,
walking
yeah.
EMF, right?
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
constant. The more of the older people are like, oh, I can trust my own intuition. I know when to get a drink of water.
Right, right. I'm aware when my blood sugar's low. Yeah.
Right. There you go. How about like, okay, so 10 years from now, say, that's arbitrary. Like, what do you hope people understand about weight that, again, that we're still missing today, that we crystal ball 10 years from now, looking at society?
What do I hope that people understand about weight? That they have so much more control than they think, and that they need to really figure out what they want, as opposed to trusting these various external sources. Because I think as we have more and more information, it just can be more and more overwhelming for people. And so that I think people just really aren't aware of how much they can change. I mean, it can be people can, start a whole different life tomorrow if they wanted to, right? You really do have that ability. But I think I would love if people were just more aware of that capacity.
Yeah, the self awareness. And like you said, you're going to start seeing results tomorrow. If you start going to the gym, you will feel better. It's not like it's a slow build on that. It might take time for the weight, but you're going to feel better.
You're going to feel better. And now you're a person who goes to the gym,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Right. Like add that to your list of lifestyle changes for the better.
Right. And just like this new identity that you can create for yourself.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think you've given so much amazing advice. Again, I love the fact that you have all this medical expertise, but you're also a life coach. It's such a rarity, I think, at least for the people I've come across in life, just to find that combination of someone that can offer both. So I really hope people reach out as a result of listening to this. So, Dr. Megan, if someone wanted to connect with you or learn more about you, where's the best place to find you?
Absolutely. So if someone's interested in working with me, they can go to my website, which is www.weightmedicinemd.com. And there's a link for a consult, and I will chat with people about what's going on. I love to chat and hear all about where somebody's coming from. And then I also have a YouTube channel, which is Weight Medicine with Dr. Megan. And I talk about all things weight related. I talk a lot about the GLP-1. So if people are confused, they don't know where to start, or they've been on one and they're not sure what to expect, I talk about all that, and I answer a lot of viewer questions too.
That's awesome. I'll make sure that's all into the show notes, of course. But thank you so much. It was really nice to talk with you. Pick your brain, just learn. I really am fascinated with what you're doing. So thanks for doing what you do, and thanks for sharing the time with me and the audience.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your podcast. I think it's so helpful for people to have really actionable tips that they can use in their everyday life. So I'm so happy to be here today. Take care. Thanks.